people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security.
Welcome to Let's Talk Justice. It is Monday, 1 p.m. I am Jade Williams from Jamaicans for Justice.
And I'm Michael Jackson, Executive Director, JFJ.
All right, so today's episode, we are going to be discussing for the substantive episode the constitutional amendment bill that was tabled last week, Tuesday, in Parliament by Minister Malahoo Forte. But before we do that, we're going to get quickly into our trivia question and write of the day today. So we'll start with the Did You Know Today? And the Did You Know Today is also about the Constitution. Actually, it's about how we change the Constitution. So there are three ways that we can change the Constitution: by a simple majority vote in Parliament, which is applicable for most of our constitutional provisions. There's also that 2/3 majority vote, which is applicable for ordinarily entrenched provisions. So, for example, those things that are in our Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, Section 13 onward, would be provisions that are ordinarily entrenched.
Auditor General, DPP.
Exactly, yes. So, and those need a 2/3 majority vote for us to change any of those provisions. And then finally, we may have to do a referendum. Now, this is normally reserved for deeply entrenched or specially entrenched provisions. So, for example, what this bill is about, changing the head of state, that is a deeply entrenched provision that will require a referendum before it can be the change can be completed. Now, there are some occasions where we may have to have a referendum for a provision that is not deeply entrenched, and that is where the provision was not able to pass by a vote in Parliament. In those cases, however, it can only pass by a referendum if 2/3 of the electorate votes for it, and that's for entrenched provisions, or 3/5 of the electorate votes for it, and that's for deeply entrenched provisions.
So to put in context for those who are following the news cycle, you would see that the opposition leader is saying that he may not be in support of this constitutional amendment bill. And given that the 2/3 majority can only be achieved at the Senate with at least one opposition member voting accordingly, if that is not done, then in this particular situation here, it requires 3/5 of the voting public to say with the government, yes, I agree.
That's right.
All right.
And so we're going to just quickly ask our trivia questions before we go into the meat of the show. So our first trivia question, or ordinary trivia question: since Jamaica's independence constitution was enacted in 1962, during which two periods did significant consultations for constitutional reform take place? And when we say periods, we're looking for something like 1920s and 1930s. So
but that's not the answer.
No, that is not the answer. So you can respond by sending a WhatsApp to 2397583 or on our YouTube chat. You can also send to our Instagram DM at JA4Justice. And our 25th anniversary trivia question for today is related to one of our previous cases. And that question is: in what year did the IACHR issue precautionary measures for child abuse in state care in Jamaica after a lobbying by Jamaicans for Justice? So in what year did the IACHR, that's the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, issue a precautionary measures for child abuse in state care in Jamaica after a lobbying by Jamaicans for Justice? So it's the same place you respond, 2397583.
All right, before we get into the show, a little bit of a happy moment because last week we heard of several people being called to the bar.
Yes.
And I want to publicly acknowledge Mr. Ranzoni Rainford. He is our case officer at JFJ. And come January, he will officially be one of our attorneys with the organization. So Ranzoni, you have made us proud. You know, I'm sorry we didn't have that little clip where we were all screaming with excitement with Ranzoni's calling to the bar. We're certainly proud of him, and we different people witnessed the different levels of dedication and the sleepless nights that he had studying to become an attorney. So we extend our congratulations. And one of our youth advocates, Tamoy Campbell, also was called to the bar last week, and we similarly extend our congratulations to her and the many others. Hard work.
Yeah.
Lots of money for the school fee, Jade.
Most certainly. But I welcome them to the profession, my new learned friends.
Oh God, I'm not the learned. Not learned or learnt. The learned.
Tradition is tradition, Mikhail.
All right, so we take the break, and then we're going to take an early break. And when we come back, we're going to the meat of the matter, discussing the constitutional amendment bill. Road to the Republic. Exciting days ahead.
Get it all in one go. Download and sign up now. The time by the One Jane Passport app is
1:15.
Fossridge is having a Christmas sale. From December 8 to December 31, save on chandeliers, wall lamps, ceiling fans, and LED bulbs. Come shop and save with up to 40% off this Christmas. Visit us in Kingston, Mandeville, Montego Bay, and Draxall. It's the Fossridge Christmas sale, December 8 to December 31. Open Sundays.
Rule the road with ATL Automotive and CIBC Caribbean. From now until January 31, 2025, a brand new Honda, BYD, Audi, Volkswagen, or Kia could be yours. Enjoy an 8.25% interest rate, 100% financing, 10 years to repay, up to 100% off processing fees, and 0% interest on an easy cover loan for your insurance. Plus, with the online CIBC loan store, you can fast track your loan application. Visit atlautomotive.com now so you can rule the road.
Are you ready to turn your sales and marketing skills into high earnings? Nationwide 90 FM is searching for business development executives to build lasting client relationships. If you have experience across all stages of the sales cycle and possess strong communication, negotiation, and time management skills with a proven sales track record, this opportunity is perfect for you. Join our team and work with the top corporate brands, media agencies, and of course, our on-air personalities. Enjoy networking opportunities, professional growth, and competitive commissions. Ready to take the next step? Send your resume to hr@nationwidenewsnetwork.com today.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are going to be discussing the constitutional amendment bill, which was tabled on Tuesday, December 10th in Parliament by Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahou Ford. The official name is the Constitutional Amendment Republic Act Bill. Right?
Yes.
Yes. So the aim of the bill, as we should be aware by now, is to repeal the 1962 Constitution Order, to recognize and implement a Jamaican constitution, and to also change our head of state, making Jamaica a republic rather than a sect of the monarchy. So additionally, it will have some other updates to other sections. I know I saw a section in it about the Electoral Commission. So we're going to be going through some of those key sections today, what some of them mean, and some thoughts on same.
So, as I said, exciting days are ahead. I think when we vote positively in a referendum, which will be the second that Jamaica has had since the last referendum in 1961, when we voted to rid of ourselves of the West Indies Federation. So exciting days are ahead. But while we're excited, a lot of us, to finally see us getting rid of the monarchy, there are some areas of concern that we would have, and I just wanted to point them out, Jade and I, to you. But we wanted to also explain to you what is in that bill, and you can make a decision for yourselves how much and to what extent you agree with the proposals. And we're also going to be guiding you through the timeline. and the fact that a general election becomes constitutionally due by September 2025, we're going to be asking ourselves, is this feasible? Or are we setting ourselves up to possibly be disappointed with the timeline and the crunch that we're operating under? Yeah. But the memorandum of objects and reasoning, as you know, sets out what the intention of the bill is. Jade articulated a lot of them already. So if you look on page 56 of the bill, it does set out what the objects and reasons of the bill is. For example, to revoke the Jamaica Constitution Order in Council 1962 and allow for the Constitution to give effect to the patriation of the Constitution, to abolish the British monarch as head of state and replace that with the office of the President of Jamaica as a republic, retain the parliamentary cabinet system of government. And I think that is instructive for those who were calling for an electoral reform. I think we can agree at this point, which is one of the challenges I'm having, is that the Constitutional Reform Committee is basically saying to the public that electoral reforms in the way that we had envisioned it, and certainly others, for example, former Prime Minister Michael Manley had called for some electoral reforms. I know former Prime Minister Bruce Golding had also called for some electoral reforms. And I think from what we have gleaned here and the direction of the CRC, we will not be seeing any significant electoral reforms happening in the country, which is something I think the public would have to pay attention to, which is also one of the reasons for us seeing in the earlier days that the phased process may be a little bit challenging, because if you're not looking at the issues and the recommendations wholesale, what you find happening is that decisions taken in phase one has already determined what the constitutional reform process is going forward.
Yes.
So that's the memorandum of objects. But Jade, we also have the preamble that has
Yes.
now been included. You want to read it with the excitement?
With the excitement, I don't know about all of that. But yes, so that is the section 3 of the amendment bill. The constitution would be amended by inserting in chapter 1 the preamble, which would say, "We, the people of Jamaica, affirm our place as a free and self-respecting people in the global community. We proudly acknowledge that our history of struggle, sacrifice, endurance, and triumph led us to become an independent democratic nation. We resoundingly acclaim this heritage and hold it in trust to pass on to future generations."
No, say this line now with the excitement that it deserves. We joyfully celebrate our resilient spirit in the face of adversity, our outstanding achievements in different fields, and our contribution to the advancement of humanity. And it continues.
Yes.
But you can read it. It's a good preamble to include, because for those who have been asking, what is the big deal about becoming a republic? It's a matter of dignity.
Yes.
Over 300 years of enslavement that saw Jamaica not advancing to the degree that we would have. So they set us back. I think black pride demands that we no longer have the monarchy embedded in our constitution. So there are some other practical components of it, but I think that's the first thing, because when you also become a republic, one of the things we should be calling for is how can we ensure that we have more participatory approaches to governance. And participatory approaches to governance will then impact your bread and butter issues.
Yes.
So, for example, even the strength of our democracy and electoral systems with the inclusion of the ECJ, which we'll get into shortly, that impacts, our ability for voting in a way that's free and fair, who sits in your parliament, and so on. So it's quite important. So as we mentioned that, Jade, one of the changes in the Constitution, proposed changes, because it's still a bill,
Yes.
and they highlight it at section 18 in the bill, but it will give effect to amendments to section 37 and section 39 subsection A in the existing constitution, which speaks to the removal of Commonwealth citizenship, and ultimately, listeners, who can actually vote and who can put themselves up to sit in the House of Representatives and the House of Senate,
Yes.
right? So, what exactly is the change there, Jade? Section 18?
Yes. So in all the areas in which we would have said that a person, a Commonwealth citizen, could do things in our constitution, we have replaced that language with a Jamaican. And Jamaican is very clear who a Jamaican is. A Jamaican is a person born here or a person who has naturalized here. And so you, as a Commonwealth citizen, a person born in another Commonwealth country, you would no longer have the benefits that you would have had under our constitution as it is written in the bill.
So the matter of denouncing citizenship elsewhere and so on, that little political debate that happened recently involving the leader of the opposition and other members of parliament or let me not say has not, because I think I'm speaking as if this bill has been passed.
Right.
But it will be settled if we vote for it.
Right.
To say that only a Jamaican citizen can actually be elected. And I like the language here because I think some of what was being proposed before, for example, only the opposition leader and so on, it would impact in terms of being a Jamaican citizenship, keeping in mind that any member of parliament can actually find themselves being nominated as the prime minister. I think just having this simple language here would settle any possible confusion that may arise rather than creating this kind of tiered level system and so on. So that is what the CRC and this bill is proposing here. But I think we can ask ourselves what the implications may be for Commonwealth citizens who have been and are residents in Jamaica who could vote. What are the implications there? And should there be some sort of transitioning period? I don't know. I think we're telling them to go and get themselves naturalized.
Yes, I think that is it.
But that's a question that we want to ask ourselves because we know that you have quite a bit of Commonwealth citizens, especially those, for example, living in other Caribbean islands, or those who come from the United Kingdom who has been here and set up the lives here. Yes. What are the implications for them? But that's what is in the bill. So food for thought.
Yeah.
All right. The main component of this bill is around the office of the president. And there are some things that we're going to be talking about, some more substantially or substantively so than others. For example, the qualifications of the president. I will ask Jay to take that. The appointment procedure, which I have a little bit of a challenge with what is being proposed there. The term limits, how to remove the president, and for me personally, and in our submission, the powers of the president. And we're going to be talking about what is there that has implications for the changes in the composition to the Senate as we now have it. So, Jade, what are some of the qualifications to becoming a president as what is being proposed here?
Well, as what is being proposed here. Okay, so there are a few things. As we said, the person must be a citizen of Jamaica, or they must be ordinarily resident in Jamaica for at least 10 of the 15 years immediately preceding the date of their nomination. And then by descent, you could also be, that could mean your parent or grandparent was the person that you are descendant from. That is the major qualifiers.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There is a procedure for appointment, though.
Yes, that's what we're going to get into now, the appointment procedure.
Right.
So if you remember what was in the CRC report, and JFJ, we articulated some challenges that basically the appointment procedure, how it was in the CRC report, which differs from the bill here, had indicated that the Prime Minister would put forward a name to the leader of the opposition, they come together, and if there is some agreement, then the matter would be taken to a vote. And by majority, by 2/3 majority, I believe it had indicated that the vote would happen. But if there was a disagreement, then simple majority vote, I believe, would have seen the appointment of the president. And we had raised concerns that that procedure basically would see the prime minister always getting his or her choice. What is in the bill now, in section 25, is that it relies on the agreement between the prime minister and the leader of the opposition. So the prime minister comes with his or her name to the opposition leader, and the opposition leader may agree, and then the matter goes to the Houses of Parliament to vote by way of a majority vote. Now, if there is a disagreement, what would happen is that the opposition leader, based on what is in the bill, can say to the prime minister, this is my proposed name.
Yes.
The prime minister, if he or she agrees on that proposed name, then the matter would go to a vote. If the prime minister does not agree with that name, then the prime minister would indicate same, then a period of 3 months would elapse, and then the prime minister would submit that name to the Houses of Parliament, and a vote would happen accordingly. So basically, the end result is the same as what was in the CRC's report. But I have some further thoughts on it, but we have to take the break. And I will do a little bit of a recap of what I just said and go back on the appointment issue. We take the break.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
30 degrees Celsius in Kingston and 28 degrees Celsius out west in Montego Bay.
Ever dreamed of visiting the City of Gold? Spend with your Sagicor Bank MasterCard credit card from November 28 to December 31, 2024 for your chance to win a luxury princess trip for two to Dubai. Yes, you could experience the glistening skyscrapers and postcard perfect attractions of Dubai. The more you spend with your Sagicor Bank MasterCard credit card, the more chances to win. Enjoy the best rewards ever. Conditions apply. Authorized under Section 58.3 of the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act. Learn more at sagicor.com.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been discussing the Constitutional Amendment Bill, and Mikhail was just going over this nomination process for the president. So Mikhail, you said the prime minister chooses someone, opposition leader agrees or may not agree, then
Yes.
they can choose someone. So go back over that for the listeners.
All right. So, and I think I should have said with clarity that you will not have the option of electing your president in the republic. So what you see happening in the United States recently, where people would vote, and I won't get into explaining the Electoral College, I can do that another day, but people would vote for the president, and you saw Donald Trump emerging as the victor. That is not what is happening here. What you're having happening is that the Houses of Parliament, where your senators and your members of Parliament sit, will basically vote on the Prime Minister's choice of a president. So what is in the bill is that the Prime Minister shall consult with the leader of the opposition on the nomination of a person based on the qualifications that Jade had outlined earlier. And there would be reasonable steps taken to reach a consensus between the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. If a consensus cannot be reached, the leader of the opposition can say to the Prime Minister, here is another name I would urge you to consider. If the Prime Minister does not agree with that name that the opposition leader had so recommended, then what you would find is that the Prime Minister now would indicate that he does not agree with that proposal. and a period not less than 3 months would elapse since the Prime Minister first made his recommendation to the Leader of the Opposition, and after that the Prime Minister shall determine the nominee, and the Prime Minister would then inform the Leader of the Opposition of that nominee, as well as informing the Speaker and the Senate President, and then that nomination will be put forward to a confirmation by way of a secret ballot at a joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament. So no matter what, the Prime Minister will get his or her choice. One can ask, what could be a proposed recommendation there? To my mind, if the Prime Minister and the opposition leader cannot come to a consensus, I don't believe, because I don't know what the purpose of that 3 months would entail, unless you're saying that some behind the scenes further consultation would be happening. I don't know what the purpose of it is. But to my mind, what I would consider and recommend to the Joint Select Committee who will be reviewing this bill is to say that if the Leader of the Opposition proposes a name and the Prime Minister cannot agree with that proposed name, then that joint sitting or voting process between the two Houses of Parliament by way of a secret ballot would vote on the two names. That's one recommendation that could be had, But to basically say that no matter what, that appointment, powers is ultimately the Prime Minister, not in an environment wherein I don't have the ability to directly vote for my Prime Minister or my Leader of the Opposition, so to speak, because you're entrusting them with the power to select the head of state. Because when you talk about a confirmation vote, if I'm confirming and voting on a single name, it's basically a rubber stamp procedure. So I think the public can decide for themselves whether or not they agree with that particular recommendation in the bill and what else could happen in lieu of that. But food for thought, if that is something that you agree on. But just to be very clear, JFJ, we do support a non-executive president. But that's not to say that we want a non-executive president without powers. Because our recommendation, certainly, to the Constitutional Reform Committee was for the president to have added reserved powers, because the Governor General does have some powers now. One of them I hope we can touch on very briefly. For example, the power to consult but not necessarily to act on the advice of the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition when the Governor General is selecting certain positions in commissions of Parliament and so on. No, I'm talking about the Governor General no.
Okay.
Yes, I'm saying that the Governor General no has reserved powers. So the question we have to ask ourselves, what of those existing reserved powers do we want to be transitioned to the president in a republic, and what more do we want? That's the question I want us to ask ourselves. So very quickly, Jade, for purposes of our listeners who may not know, I just indicated one reserved power that the Governor General has. So when you have independent bodies and you want to ensure that they are above the political fray, not subject to the direction and influence of the political directorate, then your Governor General has that power to appoint. And to also, thankfully, for example, with the Integrity Commission, when you see the attacks that it is being subjected to, the Governor General can be the person to lead a termination process subject to judicial review. And that's a good safeguard that exists. So you see where the Governor General has some good reserved powers. The Governor General, by way of Section 60 in the Constitution, it says that the Governor General can, the Governor General's signature has to be on the bills before they officially become law. Assent the laws, or we can withhold it. The existing Constitution did not say what happens if he withholds it. But you have never seen that happening because, again, we're an independent sovereign country and the Governor General acts at the behest of the monarchy. So again, the question is, what do we want the reserve powers of the president to be?
Well, I know that bill one definitely, the committee had an opinion on it. But
you know what was interesting in that exchange, Jade? When we were presenting to the CRC on this, and we said to them, in all your wisdom, based on our humble reading of the Constitution and elsewhere, like what we saw with the constitutional crisis in Australia in 1975, we cautioned the CRC that what you don't want is that you just put a clause in to say that the powers of the Governor General will transition to the President without highlighting and detailing what those powers are and whether you want the full gamut of those powers to continue. And even so, whether or not there should be some changes. And I remember flagging the particular nuance with Section 60, that if the Governor General withholds, what happens? Because the Constitution now as currently drafted doesn't say. And we got a little bit of a pushback to say that in the new dispensation, that power will not be given to the President. And we flagged a little bit of a concern to say that, but this is a person that the public is already saying too ceremonial. So when you take back that power, what will you be saying to the public? So the current bill, it does speak to the bill.
Yes, it does.
It speaks to the powers of the President in passing the laws. But a safeguard which JFJ had called for to be included is that because we respect parliamentary sovereignty, the President shall not have the power to withhold a bill and must pass it within a stipulated time period. And that stipulated time period, as outlined in the bill, is 30 days.
Yes.
And I think
that is Section 26 of the amendment bill, by the way.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think we can maybe increase it a little bit because, for example, we have seen some troubling bills passing before the Parliament that may not be in keeping with the Constitution. So the question is, a few questions I have there. If the President doesn't agree with those bills and have a little bit of a challenge with it, should he just rubber stamp it? Or should we, as we articulated before, a reserved power be given to the President, similarly to what happens in India and Ireland, that says, 1, if I find a bill to be problematic and may not be in keeping with the Constitution, the President shall have the power to refer the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration. Not a veto, no. You're just asking the Parliament for a reconsideration. And if the Parliament reconsiders it and sends it back to the President, then the President must sign, as is being articulated here. That's one. The second one is, let me not use any example, but we've seen examples in recent times that caused us much consternation. So if the President finds a bill to potentially be unconstitutional or not in keeping with the Constitution, should the President have the power to refer the matter to the Supreme Court to get the Supreme Court's advice on the matter before that particular bill is signed off in law? Those were 2 recommendations that we made to the Constitutional Reform Committee. We're happy of 1 of 3 being taken, which is putting a stipulated time period within which the bill must be passed. But we're not happy, and we're going to be calling for and making our submission before the Joint Select Committee for those 2 powers to be included in the bill as it is finalized to become law. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. The removal process, Jade.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You lost the train of thought.
No, man, I can easily get back there. So that would be an amendment to Section 26 of our current legislation. It's quite a long process, but it comes in where they speak to, in the current bill, where they speak to the tenure of the President. They also speak to how that person would be removed.
Process detail, no?
Yes, it is detailed.
Investigator panel and all kind of things.
So essentially what would happen in the first instance is that if there is a question as to the person's ability to continue to hold office, then there would be grounds presented, I think, by the leader of government business as to why they no longer have confidence in this person. And if it is that the parliament will vote to decide, and this must be a 2/3 majority vote, to decide as to whether or not an investigatory panel will be convened to look into the issues that have been tabled that would be affecting the office of the president. The investigatory panel will do their investigation. They will be able to return the findings to the office of the president for their response before those findings are presented to Parliament. And on presentation to Parliament now, Parliament will again do a 2/3 majority vote to see if the president will be removed. So that is the process that...
But what I found instructive in that process, Jade, is the inclusion of the courts. And the reason I found it instructive, remember, listeners, the CRC pushed back to say that we can't have impeachment. But remember, we already have different provisions for... It's not the word impeachment, but judicial review and so on to remove public officers. And one of the recommendations that we will be making is to look, I believe, at the Brazilian model that includes some court, some judge in the process to ensure that it is not politicized as much. Because this is the challenge I'm having, we can create our own model. And that's why I'm saying I don't think there is any justification for not having impeachment in the new dispensation. When you already have some provisions for impeachment, when you look at the Local Governance Act of 2016, that speaks to how a mayor can be removed from a municipality, as you have in Portmore, right? And the reason I'm flagging it here in terms of that investigator panel and the inclusion of the courts is to say that is one safeguard that can be included to ensure that the impeachment provisions are being adhered to and you are mitigating that politicizing of the process. And Brazil, they have their own challenges because everything, you have nuance and political context. But again, certainly that is one area we can flag. Damien, can we continue given we came on a little bit late? Or we have to take the break?
Yes. All right. So we're going to take the break. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up this conversation about the Constitutional Amendment Bill. And then we'll speak a little bit about JFJ's year so far. And then we'll close out.
Unique Living's new arrivals are here. Revamp your space with sleek, fixed and sliding show panels, shower systems and faucets, stylish vanities, basins and kitchen sinks, closet and storage solutions, hanging aids and more. Available in different finishes and sizes to match your style. Visit them today and transform your space at shop number 630 Dunrobin Avenue, Kingston 10. Call 876-755-3661 or visit their website at uniquelivingja.com to shop.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing Mikel's favorite topic, the Constitution and our constitutional reform and amendment process. We're discussing the amendment bill. Before the break, we were just talking about the process of removing the president. We were talking about the fact that impeachment is not included in this bill as one of the processes for our consideration. What else do we need to let the listeners know?
A lot more things, Jane, but leave me alone in the public. All right, but what is instructive about where they talk about the president is the implications for it's two things. The implications for the composition of the Senate. One of the things I want the public to recognize is that the president will now have the powers to nominate 3 of the senators. So the Senate composition size will increase from 21 to 27.
Yes.
Remember, as it currently stands, the Prime Minister would indicate to the Governor General that, hey, I have my 30 names. The opposition would have 8. That is now changing, where the Prime Minister would be able to appoint 15 of the 27. The Leader of the Opposition appoints 9, and the President appoints 3. Here is the predicament that we find ourselves in, that 2/3 majority. Now, the bill does clearly state, and let me say this first, and I want you to do a little bit of a math with me. 15 plus 3, that's 18 of 27, means that you can achieve that 2/3 majority without the opposition. Right? Remember, to get to that 2/3 majority now at the Senate, you need at least 1 opposition member. what was recommended in the 1995 Constitutional Reform Report was still to maintain having this at least an opposition member to reach that 2/3 majority. This is now changing it. The bill does very clearly state, however, that to make amendments to entrenched provisions, you still require the opposition. In fact, the bill goes as far to say that while the views of all the senators will be looked at, only those appointed by the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition can actually effect the change to an entrenched provision. Good safeguard. Yes. But my question then, when I read the Constitutional Reform Report, and now, what implications does that have for the extension of a state of public emergency, which is not an entrenched provision? But you're giving awesome powers to the executive, and to my mind, to have the Prime Minister in effect having his or her choice of a president, and then the president nominating 3 of the senators. What are the implications there? I hope I haven't lost anybody, but I wanted to think on these things. Yeah. The other thing about the Senate composition here that the public can look at is that the president's choice, my apologies, can now say these 3 individuals can come from civil society, us. It can come from any reputable business official and so on. But interestingly, it also does state inclusion of persons, Jamaicans who reside abroad. That means someone from the diaspora can actually be seated as a senator. That's an important provision. But I wanted to look a little bit further, Jade, what implications that may have vis-a-vis the other areas that spoke so eloquently about just being a Jamaican citizen, where they have to be a resident here. I don't think the bill touched on it. I would have to double check. I don't want to speak out of turn. But that jumped out at me when I was reading.
In my recollection, it didn't touch on it in quite the detailed way that it did as it spoke to the president.
So you may have a little bit of a challenge there, so to speak, because if you give effect, for example, to the Senate and say it must be a Jamaican president, what implications does this have here when you're saying that the president can appoint somebody who lives overseas? So a little bit of a food for thought whether or not you can have 2 contradicting provisions. I don't know if it is. I have to look back on it. I think we must, but we will be touching on that. Yeah, go ahead.
You wanted to go to the ECJ next?
Well, you have 2 more points, just very briefly. Section 49, which speaks to the provisions about how the Constitution may be amended. They changed it. We're going to have to be reading that word for word to ensure that we have not seen a weakening of that particular protection in terms of how bills are passed, constitutional amendments are made. But what I can say is that some of the periods within which a particular bill is tabled for debate and then reopen a session and so on, that period has been changed, reduced a little bit. So we will talk more on it. But ECJ, Jade.
Yes, so we would have seen the Electoral Commission being entrenched in this bill. Or that's the intention. That is part 5 of the bill, an amendment to section 67. But essentially, it would include the Electoral Commission and exclude the office of the ombudsman, the political ombudsman, which was included in the ECJ bill last year.
That's the intention.
Yes,
but remember, the constitutional wording doesn't say that, so ultimately goes back to what is in the statute.
True.
So one of the things I would caution, while we welcome the inclusion of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, again, that was promised as far back as 1995, and then in 2006 I saw the commission itself being established, yada yada yada. However, the challenge for me is that you do not see much protection of the ECJ in this, because having an office entrenched is one thing, but you don't want to entrench weakness, so to speak. I want to see wordings not subject to the direction or control of any person or authority, similarly to how you have the Director of Public Prosecution, Auditor General, and so on. That type of independence must clearly be outlined in the Constitution. And that is something I would urge the Constitutional Reform Committee and the Joint Select Committee to look at. What is the independence structure of the ECJ to be included in the bill. Yeah? And I think very similarly, I would also make a call when you talk to the office of the president. What happens in times of crisis to say that the president can act in a particular manner that is not undermining parliamentary sovereignty, but is to ensure that constitutional crisis can be mitigated as best as possible. That type of dynamic between the president and the prime minister is something I hope when we make a submission before the Joint Select Committee will be touched on a little bit. And the last thing from me, Jane, on this particular topic is a disappointment. If you read the CRC report, listeners, similarly to how you have the ECJ being an interim act being promised to be included in the Constitution, that was made for the Office of the Public Defender Interim Act of 2002. Now, that is not included. And to be very clear, when we made our presentation before the CRC, what we had said was that that line in the report that says that the basic functions of the public defender will be included in the constitutional amendment bill, we had a challenge with it.
Yes.
Because the Public Defenders Act, as you heard us articulate before, it has several weaknesses. For example, not even the power to promote human rights is there. So one of the things that JFJ we were asking for, whatever is proposed in the bill, should be broad enough to say that when the statute is revised, you have a strong public defender. Quite frankly, we want it to be established into the National Human Rights Institution. Why am I flagging this? Last week, Jada went to the December 10 events held. A beautiful debate done by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. St. Jago won, right? Against Wolmers, who did exceptionally well. But I asked myself the question, this wonderful work being done by the MLCA, the Constitutional Affairs Ministry, should it be done by the Office of the Public Defender? And then I start asking myself, what is the purpose of the ministry versus the public defender? And I would have loved to be able to take up that human rights unit of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs and drop it downtown, because that was the work of the public defender. And my fear is that it's not included in this bill. So I want the ministry to send a very strong signal, the government of Jamaica, what is their intention with the Public Defender's Office, and do they or are they still committed to that body being strengthened into the National Human Rights Institute? And the fear that I have is that it's not included here, and I would want some answer on that. Why is it not included in the amendment bill?
Most certainly. Thank you for that, Mikkel. All right. So I had wanted Mikkel to give us a brief about what to expect from a referendum, what it is and all of that, but I don't know if we can get into that fulsomely today, can we?
Well, just very quickly to say this, you have it up? Sometimes I have to put, here's my notes. You know,
Yes.
always, you see Jade laugh at me with my notes, but you see it comes in handy. So, how the Constitution itself changes is that 3 months must elapse from the introduction of the bill to the Houses of Representatives, that's your lower house where MPs sit, to the commencement of the debate. 3 months must elapse. The question is, how long is the debate? So, for example, when we calculate the 3 months, Jay, this bill was tabled when?
This bill was tabled December 10th.
December 10. December 10 to January 10, January 10 to February 10, February 10 to March 10, right? So the debates will happen, which means that the Joint Select Committee, you can expect them to start accepting recommendations perhaps around February before the lower house actually debates the bill. After that debate is concluded, then 3 months must elapse between the conclusion of that debate and the passing of the bill. So, in other words, you're looking at roughly 7 months. And that's the best case scenario before a referendum can be had. 7 months. And I don't see that happening.
Well,
and I wouldn't want the process to be politicized to say that because you can't get a consensus and so on, you know, it wouldn't happen. Because you see, if the opposition doesn't play a ball, you know, it goes to the people. But there's another set of timeline.
Yes.
For that to happen. And again, that's less than 2 months. if the Senate rejects it before it comes to the people. Not less than 2 months. So ideally, I don't see the referendum happening before the next election. Not ideally. I don't see it happening, which is sad for me because I wanted to vote to get rid of the monarchy.
Yes, I know you did. All right, so we have 2 minutes left in the show. So I will give our trivia question responses. We did have some winners. So our first trivia question was related to the Constitution and the last 2 times that would have had substantive consultations for constitutional reform, and the answer for that was the 1970s and 1990s. And we have the winner. It's Kimmy on Instagram, so she will be able to receive her prize in Instagram DM. We have also, we did not get a winner for our anniversary trivia, but I would like to say to our loyal listener, news commentator J.A. on YouTube, there is a package for you at Nationwide 90 FM on Bradley Avenue. Thank you for being a listener. We prepared a little bit of our JFJ items for you, so you can come and pick it up when you have the time.
Yeah, another thing, Jade, I think this topic is heavy. I just had 2 students listening in and said, Ms. Jackson, even though you teach us these things in class, and not getting some of them, but I think we may write an article in one of the papers to explain our positions. And I'm so sorry, listeners, we came a little bit late. The traffic is so bad.
Yes.
Christmas traffic, yeah?
We came late on a day when we had so much to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, yeah. Take note. We just got some messages based on what we just articulated. But it's 2:00. It's our last show of the year, which means that we're on break.
Yes, we are.
Are you as happy as I am, Jade?
I'm happier.
Anyway, listeners, please be good and please keep safe. We will see you again in January, and I'm sure you'll hear from us in other fora and spaces.
For sure.
All right. Have a good holidays.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
The people's champion. Justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. Stay ahead of the curve with our cutting-edge reporting and accurate breaking news coverage.
We're having an earthquake. Oh, God.
Hear it here first on Nationwide 90 FM. Tune in, turn up the volume, and listen. We bring a mix of news, entertainment, and sports to your lives.
Nationwide 90 FM's live and continuous coverage of the World Championships in Budapest, Hungary.
News and discussions week mornings.
Coming up in the news at 6 for this morning.
Entertainment in the afternoons, then news again in the evenings.
Nationwide news at this hour, fired.
Also tune into the entertainment and sports shows in the nights and on the weekends.
It is Boy Things After Dark right here on Nationwide 90